If he's strong enough, you hear the cheers, it's a good sign. Someone is about to appear at that balcony. He has, of course, been very poorly. He spent 5 weeks in hospital.
Catholics worldwide enter a period of mourning for the late Pope Francis and a period of speculation over who will succeed him. A conclave of cardinals will soon be called to elect a new Supreme Pontiff.
The world awoke to heartbreak on Easter Monday as the Vatican confirmed that Pope Francis had passed away at the age of 88. Just the day before, he had appeared before thousands in St. Peter's Square, offering blessings and smiles during Easter Mass. Despite being visibly frail and confined to a wheelchair, driven through the crowd, he paused to bless babies, wave to the faithful, and witness his Easter message being read aloud by an aide. His final words, aimed at the world, were a powerful plea for peace in Gaza and Ukraine, condemning the violence consuming global conflicts. These were the last public moments of a pope who spent over a decade championing the marginalized. His death at 7:35 a.m. the next morning sent shockwaves through the Catholic community and beyond. As the news spread from Rome across continents, crowds rushed towards St. Peter's Square, with many in tears, stunned that a man so publicly present hours earlier was now gone. The timing, symbolism, and emotions surrounding his passing made this moment one of the most poignant in modern church history. Though Pope Francis's declining health had been no secret, he'd battled pneumonia just weeks before and had a partially removed lung from his youth. His sudden passing still felt jarring. After all, the pontiff had just stood, smiled, and waved his way through the most sacred day of the Christian calendar. Few could have imagined that behind the holy pageantry of Easter Sunday, the leader of over 1 billion Catholics was facing his final hours. The Vatican announced his passing with solemn reverence, while media outlets and mourners alike reflected on the quiet strength he carried through illness. For someone who once described himself as a sinner whom the Lord has looked upon, his humility shone through even in his suffering. His ability to endure pain without complaint, to smile through discomfort, and to show up for his people until the very end spoke volumes about his devotion. His death on Easter Monday wasn't just a tragic coincidence, it became a final message in itself, embodying sacrifice, rebirth, and the enduring spirit of service that marked his papacy from beginning to end. The story of Pope Francis's life defied all expectations. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires to Italian immigrants fleeing fascism, his journey to the papacy began far from the opulence of Vatican halls. He once worked as a nightclub bouncer and chemical technician, roles that placed him in the real world among ordinary people. But it was this very grounding that later defined his papacy. He joined the Jesuits, an order known for discipline, education, and service, eventually rising through the ranks to become Archbishop of Buenos Aires. In 2013, he made history by becoming the first non-European pope in 1,300 years, the first from the Americas, and the first Jesuit ever to hold the papal office. His election stunned the world, but brought new hope for reform, humility, and global inclusiveness. Even his name, Francis, was chosen in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the poor. From the very beginning, Pope Francis made it clear he was not here to reign like royalty, but to serve with compassion. His story became a beacon for anyone who believed that faith should walk hand in hand with humanity. Pope Francis's reign was nothing short of revolutionary. He shattered centuries of formality and grandiosity by choosing to live in a modest Vatican guest house instead of the regal papal apartments. He washed the feet of prisoners, hugged the disfigured, and consistently used his platform to advocate for the poor, immigrants, and environmental justice. He became the people's pope, never afraid to challenge tradition when it conflicted with compassion. He referred to the church not as a fortress, but as a field hospital, encouraging priests to go where the wounds of society bled deepest. He tackled corruption within the church and pushed for transparency and reform. His advocacy wasn't just spiritual, it was practical, speaking out on climate change, economic inequality, and human rights. Every action, from riding in a modest Fiat to refusing a gold cross, was a declaration that the role of the Pope is not to be served, but to serve. Over his 11-year papacy, he brought the Church back to its roots, not just as an institution, but as a moral force in a wounded world. In keeping with his lifelong rejection of excess, Pope Francis reshaped the very traditions surrounding papal death. For centuries, the passing of a pope followed a strict and symbolic sequence. The Camerlengo would call out the pope's baptismal name 3 times. If there was no response, his death was declared official. The pope's fisherman's ring would be destroyed, marking the end of his authority. His body would be embalmed, displayed on a raised platform, and buried in 3 nested coffins, cypress, lead, and oak, each symbolizing a layer of spiritual and institutional legacy. But Pope Francis changed all of it. He requested a simple zinc-lined wooden coffin. He declined the catapult display in St. Peter's Basilica, opting instead to remain quietly within the coffin with the lid removed for public mourning. These choices weren't made to make a statement, they were simply a continuation of how he lived, humbly without grandeur, and with a deep desire to remain connected to the common people even in death. Pope Francis's final resting place was another departure from tradition. Rather than being buried alongside centuries of predecessors in the Vatican grotto beneath St. Peter's Basilica, he chose a different path. The Basilica of St. Mary Major, nestled in the heart of Rome, would become his eternal home. This wasn't just a matter of logistics or architecture. It was a profound spiritual decision. The basilica, accessible to everyday Romans and pilgrims alike, represents his desire to stay among the people even after death. It reflects his deep devotion to the Virgin Mary, whom he often credited with protecting and guiding his papacy. By choosing St. Mary Major, he ensured that he wouldn't be a distant figure buried in solemn isolation, but someone whose legacy could be visited, felt, and honored by anyone walking through the city he loved. For the Pope, who spent his life breaking barriers, this final act of humility sealed his identity as the shepherd who never abandoned his flock, even in death. The world's reaction to Pope Francis's passing was immediate and heartfelt. Leaders from all walks of life, many outside the Catholic Church, expressed sorrow and admiration. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised his global impact, citing how his humility and compassion transcended faith boundaries. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni shared personal reflections, calling their relationship one of sincere friendship and guidance. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who had met with the Pope just hours before his death, mourned alongside millions of Christians. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, recalled a man who was deeply spiritual but also funny, warm, and full of life. These tributes revealed that Pope Francis was more than a religious figure. He was a global moral compass, someone whose presence touched hearts regardless of nationality, belief, or political leaning. His death wasn't just the loss of a pope, it was the departure of a rare soul, whose kindness reverberated through every corner of the modern world. With Pope Francis's death, attention now turns to the next chapter in church history, the selection of his successor. Following 9 days of mourning known as the Novenials, the College of Cardinals will enter the Sistine Chapel to begin the ancient and sacred process of conclave. This group of senior clergy will remain isolated from the world until a new pope is chosen by a 2/3 majority vote. Once consensus is reached, white smoke will billow from the chapel's chimney, and the cardinal deacon will step forward to proclaim, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope. While the process is steeped in centuries of ritual, the stakes today are higher than ever. The new pontiff will inherit a church redefined by Francis's radical compassion and humility, and must navigate a complex, globalized world. The conclave isn't just about choosing a new leader, it's about defining the future of the Catholic Church and whether it will continue to walk the path that Francis so boldly carved.
Pope Francis's legacy will be remembered not through monuments but through the messages he left behind. His final Easter address encapsulated everything he stood for: calls for peace in conflict zones, defense of religious and personal freedoms, and a desperate plea to help the world's forgotten and starving. These weren't political gestures, they were reflections of a man who lived his faith loudly but gently. His was a papacy of listening, lifting, and reaching out. In an era dominated by division, he became a bridge builder. His consistent call to go to the margins challenged every believer to move beyond comfort zones. And as he passed away during the holy season of Easter and the Jubilee year, a time symbolic of redemption and renewal, his final message felt like a divine echo, an invitation to live with courage, serve with joy, and love without limits. Even in silence, Pope Francis speaks through the actions he inspired. As millions prepare to watch the historic funeral and conclave that follow, the world reflects on what Pope Francis meant, not just to Catholics, but to humanity. His passing during Easter and the Jubilee year has magnified the emotional resonance of this moment. The Church stands at a pivotal crossroads, tasked with honoring his legacy while finding a voice strong enough to carry it forward. Who will succeed the Pope who turned the Church into a sanctuary for the poor, the broken, and the overlooked? And how will they lead in a time where faith and society intersect in increasingly complicated ways? One thing is certain: Pope Francis changed the papacy forever. From his first humble wave on the balcony to his final resting place among the people, he redefined what it means to be a leader of faith.
As the bells of St. Peter's toll in mourning, his challenge to the world remains clear. Build bridges, not walls, and never forget those who live in the shadows.